Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of this week's episode. So join Al and I as we analyse everything that was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So let's jump right into it.
I think Checo's really good start to the season is going to be really good for Red Bull, not only just for Red Bull themselves, but really good for Max to have some competition and, in a polite way, remember that he's not number one and he's not on top of the world, and he does have a driver in his team that's also really good. And as much as he's competing with the rest of the track, he's also competing with Sergio, and maybe stop looking down on Sergio so much but start looking at him as an equal.
And I think
We'll see.
the other issue for Max in the fact that he does look down a lot on other drivers to a degree, because he does have his 2 titles. There aren't a lot of other drivers. So, I mean, Checo doesn't have a title. So for him, it'll be that mentality of like, well, I've achieved 2 world titles. What have you done?
Yeah,
The only 2 people that he can really go up against on the grid with that is Lewis and Fernando.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I really get that kind of in the interactions, you do get that level of respect from Max in the sense of like when he does speak to Fernando or Lewis, there's that kind of bit of reserve.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't really give that to anyone else. And,
Exactly.
But yeah, so no, I definitely think that Checo being number 1 podium was fantastic for Red Bull, for Max, and especially for Checo. I love Checo. I think he's a sweetheart. So I think that's good. But can we just talk about the absolute fuck up that was this race? There was a cat on the track.
The cat.
There was rubbish on the track. And then there was photographers in the pit lane.
Yeah. The FIA has actually come out, I think it was earlier today, maybe last night, and summoned 5 of its own officials who were in charge of pit lane and parc ferme throughout the race to provide an explanation as to how photographers were allowed in the fast lane while the race was still being held and a pit stop was still to be.
I saw so many things on social media, like videos of everyone, like the drivers were understandably fuming, being like it's really not that big of a deal, blah blah blah. Like they're trained to stop, and so many. I've had this overwhelming need to defend these drivers and be like, you don't understand that they have lost drivers to shit like this before. Like in those situations, the drivers are probably more likely to swerve away from the horde of humans
than to break
and hit them head on. Like it doesn't matter, regardless of why they're angry. They should never have been put in that place. They should never have been put in that situation. Absolute fuck up.
It goes back to what Lando said after Melbourne and the fans swarmed the track before the conclusion of the race. And it said that it's selfish to put drivers in that position, because if something were to happen, it's not just the person who is hit by the oncoming car, it's the driver themselves who's going to have to live with that for the rest of their life.
100%. They're going to have so much guilt with them for so long, as anyone would. Anyone involved in any kind of car crash carries that guilt.
Exactly.
And you're just kind of to you it may seem like, oh well, that person's dead, but that's their fault, so we can move on. But that driver may never hop back behind the wheel.
That career ending.
And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Ocon turned around and said, I refuse to hop back behind the wheel before there's safety measures in place at the next Grand Prix, and I'd be 100% behind him.
I'd be surprised if there is not a significant change heading into Miami, given that there's such a short turnaround.
And I think especially with Miami, because I've seen people are getting so excited for it and they're so keen, which is fantastic, as we were for Melbourne. But people have that little bit overwhelmingly excited, and I really think that when it comes to Miami, we definitely need to have really strong rules and set times and security in place so we don't have a repeat of the last 2 Grand Prix.
Exactly.
And I mean, I was embarrassed. I already left the Grand Prix before everyone had even started jumping the fences. I was already on a tram, but
yeah, I was back at my hotel.
Yes, I was on the tram going back to my accommodation, watching streaming on the phone, because we wanted to see exactly what happened with the grid. And because as we were saying earlier today, our Grand Prix was such an absolute fuck up of a restart that we wanted to see how everyone finished. We wanted to see how it all went. And we were watching it, and we were watching people jump on the track. And I have never been more embarrassed to say that I'm an Australian who was at the Melbourne Grand Prix, because I was like, that wasn't me. I would never do that. There were still tractors and cars on track. I would never do that. And it was just embarrassing that these people, despite all the losses, despite all the damages to people, cars, and every, like, you know, all the problems as well, despite everyone saying don't do it, they just jump the fence. And it's so dangerous.
What went through their mind and for them to comprehend and be like, yeah, this is a good idea. It is such a selfish act for them to have just gone, I don't care about anyone else's safety. This is what I want to do and I'm doing.
Yeah. And we waited till they open it. So, like, they have special areas in the track where the marshals will, like, actually open it so you can walk on. We didn't go down to the pit lane or anything. We just literally walked on the track, but we waited patiently because we were like, well, we're not going to jump a fence, you know, that's potentially dangerous. We could break a bone trying to do something stupid. And we're going to wait till we've been given the A-OK, because these cars could literally mow us down in seconds.
I think I'm around like 300k an hour.
Exactly. Like, and even in like the videos you get, like, as a spectator, you literally, they're there for 1 second.
100%.
They are there and they're gone. You hear them more than you even get to see them on some, like, areas. And just to put yourself at risk of jumping on there when you haven't been given the all clear. And like I said, there was, in the area that we were at, where the main, like, again, so embarrassing, when I show you photos of where I sat, there is videos of people in my stand and the 2 stands near me, and you can see them clearly from the same area where I was sitting, where people were just getting on that track whatever way possible. And there was a tractor still there with a car still hanging from it.
Yeah.
Like, they were still removing it, and people running on there as this tractor is trying to. I've seen a video of one Australian literally touching the car as it's hanging. Like, what?
Like, what? Tractors and cars have already been such a contentious issue. Why would you go up and touch a Formula One car hanging off a tractor that is in pieces?
Exactly.
It's in a volatile shape. Who knows what sort of damage has been done to the floor and to the mechanics of it. Why go up and touch it and risk fucking something up more?
Why would you even touch? To me, beyond that, like, who would touch it in that situation regardless? But beyond that, who would touch cars except the mechanic? And you just walked straight up and slapped it, knocking anything loose, causing who knows what's. It's already damaged, like you said. You could create further damage by slapping it hard. It was an absolute shocker. And so then we got these photographers. I felt better when I saw the photographers. A part of me, a cruel, evil part of me, thought, oh, it's not just Australia that's fucking stupid. But
I get that, yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen a horde of humans react so fucking slow to a car coming towards them.
Exactly.
Where I watched one photographer literally just stand there and look at the car and then go, oh shit. Like,
oh, it's coming at me. I should probably get out of the way.
It was infuriating to watch. And like I said, you can hear those cars coming. You would think, you know, coming into the pit lane, you would just, you know, move a little bit, but no, they just blocked off the entire road. It was just ridiculous. I still cannot fathom it.
No, it's mind-boggling. But the impressive thing to come out of it, though, was the fact that Esty Bestie got 50 laps on the same set of tyres and managed to hold up so many cars. Like, he didn't get overtaken, which was an incredible feat, in my opinion, because, I mean, he had the likes of Hulkenberg, Lando, Tsunoda, Piastri, all behind him, gearing up in decent cars to overtake him, and not a single one of them was able to make the move and make it stick.
But can we also just acknowledge the fact that Ocon did 50 laps on one set of tyres? And I swear Valtteri Bottas was in the pit lanes like
4 times.
I think it was 4 definitely, but it felt like bloody 12. Like, every time you're watching a lap, the next minute you hear is, and
Valtteri Bottas is in the pit lane again.
And then a few laps later, Bottas is in it. And it's like, what is he doing there?
But it wasn't even him. It was also like, he was switching between Bottas is in the pits, Gasly's in the pits, Bottas is in the pits, Gasly's in the pits.
Like, I just want to know what's going through Alfa Romeo's head. Like, I'm sorry, but if Ocon can do 50 laps on one set of tyres, and we've got other teams doing 1 pit stop, why are we doing 4 for one drop? Like,
Alpha would have to have been nursing an issue across the weekend, especially on both cars. It's got to be some sort of manufacturing issue with one of their parts. Because, I mean, Bottas pitted 4 times throughout the race. And then Zhou he pitted once. and then he ended up having to retire.
Yeah,
so I think there was
right.
an overall issue with the cars on the weekend, which is I'm
Yeah.
giving them the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, I hope so, because they really and it's just rough, because I'm, you know, Bottas is our adopted Australian son,
Yeah,
which I love that that's just becoming like a nationally
accepted.
title for him. But I really love Bottas. I really think, he really loves Australian culture, and I really just love how he's grasped it, and I've got a soft spot for him. So watching him struggle when I know he's a good driver and I know that he wants to give it his all, it was really difficult to watch with Baku. And being in the pits so often, it raised concerns, like there's obviously something going wrong there.
It sort of takes me back. It's not as significant, but maybe it was like a pressure issue, like what Lando sustained earlier in the season. I think it was the first race where he was in and out of the pits consistently, having to have the pressure regassed so he could continue. So he was down the bottom consistently, in and out of the pits every 4, 5, 6 laps.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put it down to benefit of the doubt that it's an issue that Alfa Romeo are hopefully working on, and that with some upgrades we'll fix it. Because, I mean, at the end of last season, they weren't doing too bad.
No, they weren't. That's why I'm so shocked, because I was hoping that with Bottas and how they went last season, I was like, this could be really promising. We could have a little bit of new competition rising through, and nothing.
A little bit of spice in the midfield.
I was like, this could be a bit of fun, but unfortunately it's just a bit disappointing. But what I was going to say on that topic with Alfa Romeo is I remember very much with the Australian Grand Prix, they kept putting that neon green paraffin wax on the car to check its aerodynamics, and they did that a lot with Bottas during the practice races, and I think even with towards the end.
Yeah.
They were really having to test the aerodynamics of his car, because they kept having issues. So obviously there's something that they just haven't been able to fine tune yet.
Which, I mean, at this point in the season is concerning that we're 3 races in. Are we 3 races? 4 races? I don't even know at this point.
We're
4 races.
Yeah.
That at this point in the season, they are still yet to figure out what's wrong with the car. At least after the first 3 races with McLaren's tractor, they've been able to sort of figure out what was going wrong, bring some upgrades which have greatly improved their performance and brought them back to being where they should have been at the start of the season. But it just doesn't appear that's going to be the case for Alfa at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm losing hope with them after 4 races. I'm just not seeing any progress being made, unfortunately.
They're doing, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're worse than a Williams at the moment. Williams for the last few years consistently bad. They've improved.
I know. They're actually doing really well. I was happily surprised this year, like this season. I've been like, oh, this is kind of fun. This is different. But no, you're completely right. Alfa Romeo has usually, done so much better than Williams. And right now I'm sitting here going, well, this is just lacking. Like, it's good for Williams, but I was expecting more from Alfa Romeo.
And it's also, I would think, going to be a concerning point for Audi, given that they are taking over ownership of the team in 2 years. So if the car's not up to scratch and is not performing adequately, not developing in the right manner, and it's not going to be up to a point where they have enough data come 2026 to introduce the car, it's going to put them on the back foot. So I feel like, I don't know, hopefully Miami's different and they have that, they are nursing, but it was an absolute disaster of a weekend for them.
It was, and I'm not even going to try and sugarcoat it. The race was boring.
Oh, it was so fucking boring.
If the race was so boring, I played Tetris on my phone.
Yeah,
like, I was playing Tetris and Sudoku, and I was like listening to the commentators. Speaking of the commentators, can we just have a round of applause for the Taylor Swift?
Oh, Taylor Swift references have been on point.
You know me, I'm not a T-Swizz fan, but oh my God, I was just cackling at all the references. It was so good.
And some of them were, I was half asleep watching this race because it was so boring, it put me to sleep. And then Crofty would come out with a line or two, and it would take me a second to be like, I get that reference.
Yeah, I was and I wasn't fully paying attention, but I was listening to the commentary, and Crofty would say something, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's a good one. Like that was really well done."
I'm
He
like, how are you coming up with these,
and
Crofty?
he
Like,
did it so seamlessly. Like you didn't like it didn't feel like he had a list of her songs next to him and he was just choosing one. Like he really made it. Like I actually think he's definitely going to be a big Taylor Swift fan for that kind of, effortless.
same with Ted. Some of the stuff that he came out with in the pit.
Fernando Alonso was his commentary on everyone else during the race, like saying their tires looking warm, the track's like really warm, like, and just keeping, his team notified of everything. And to me, it just showed really good sportsmanship that he was like, look, their tires are looking really warm, like, or they've got no traction. So if anything happens, he's like, no, we noticed that was happening. This is what happens. I really appreciated that. The one thing I love about a sport is good sportsmanship. And he really was showing that on track this race.
Especially with these little tips to Lance, like, my brake balance is working well for me. Maybe he could try that. I thought that was something we don't see a lot of.
No, and I think like with a lot of the teams are against each other, but then in the teams you've also got like that little in-house rivalry, which is good. You need competition, but I think a lot of the time some of the drivers get so wound up with their in-house competition that they also forget they are teammates.
Yeah.
It was really nice to see Fernando being like, we're against each other, but at the same time, if you're struggling, like, let me know and I'll give you the tips and tricks. Because he's currently the oldest person on the track and he's got years of experience. He is a world champion. Like, it was just really wonderful to see him showing sportsmanship to his team, the whole track, just everyone. It was so heartwarming. And I just loved it. I really walked away. Like, I already loved Alonso, but I walked away going, oh, I just love him even more.
I thought it was also really nice of like Lance to communicate with his team and be like, Fernando, I'm not going to attack. We're on the same team and we have the same goal.
I know, that made my heart a little bit fuzzy. I was like, that's really sweet. Like, you could tell that for Aston Martin, they're not thinking about, the winning. They're thinking about the points. Like, I'm not attacking. Let's just do the best thing by the team. Like, that to me was just...
I think they also know personally that Max, the most likely competitor to win the championship, but Red Bull aren't a shoo-in for the constructors at this point. So if they can get in and get some more funding and everything, they'll be in a position in the coming seasons.
I agree. I think there's still lots of potential with Aston Martin, and they've had a really good start to this season. They have done really, really well. I'm thoroughly surprised and not upset about it with how well they've been.
It's nice to have another team up there, so it gets rid of a little bit of the predictability. It's not just going to be a Red Bull Ferrari or a Red Bull Mercedes.
Yeah, like I think, for the last few years it has just been Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and it is getting to that point of a little bit of, predictability, and there's not much excitement to it. You're kind of like, yeah, of course they were going to get it. Where I think that the midfield have had really good, they've been doing really well this season. And I think Aston Martin really have a chance of getting up there, especially for the team. And I think that'd be really refreshing to see someone new up on top.
Definitely. And I would just it would be great to see.
I think going back on our conversation this morning, it'd be kind of nice for Toto and Christian to realize that it's not all about them.
Oh, that's slim pickings.
It might just give him a little nudge in the right direction of like, hey, you're not that special.
Speaking of Toto and the absolute bore that was the Baku Grand Prix, Toto has said that the F1 need to act. I don't know how he wants them to act, but he wants them to act to prevent the recurrence of a boring Grand Prix where it was virtually impossible for overtakes to occur. And I'm like, you had 3 DRS zones. Yes, it's a street circuit. I think a lot of the overtaking was prevented because of Mr. Ocon and his next generation hard tyre that lasted forever and a day. And he didn't require a pit stop. So with that lack of, new tyre and things like that, if he had pitted at the safety car, it could very well have been a different story. But, I mean, there's also been a lot of controversy coming out about the shortened DRS zone on the pit straight, and that has also prevented a lot of overtaking, as drivers had to, like, the DRS stopped earlier, so they didn't have enough or more momentum going into the corner, and a less opportunity to brake late with more speed, allowing them a better opportunity to overtake. But I don't know. I just think that's a bit of a cop-out.
I just think on that respect, like, we saw some really good overtaking at Baku. Like, Lando.
That move from Lando on Hulkenberg, my God.
Amazing. And it was, again, seamless.
In a position where, on a turn where not many overtakes happen. It was a risky move, and he got it done, and it stuck.
And he did it well. Like, it didn't for 1 second look awkward or rushed or anything. He made it look so professional.
I think it's because he spent the last 15 laps dreaming of that moment. He was like, I'm getting this done, and it will look amazing.
And I think, there was overtaking. There was areas to do it. I at the bottom of it, yes, I understand making it a non-boring race, but at the same time, we have literal lives on the line for this sport. And I think at the end of the day, I would prefer a boring race and all the drivers come out completely healthy and completely safe than to have a really, exciting, fast, action-packed race and for us to lose another driver. Tragic. Yes. I don't agree with Toto there. I think if the FIA can make a race where it's fun, but at the end of it, at the bottom line, the unnegotiable is every driver's safe, I'm going to go with that option every time.
Oh, definitely. And I think it comes back to the fact of the Toto Christian argument where they think everything's about them. Mercedes didn't do as well as hoped this weekend. They had a lot of issues with George. He only qualified 11th. They didn't have the pace. So I think Toto's criticisms of the race stem from the fact that they had a bad weekend, and he's taking it out on everyone else and wanting them to change the format simply because it doesn't benefit them.
No, that's exactly right. And I remember George literally saying in his car to the team, he was like, we just didn't have the pace. If you don't have the pace,
you don't have the pace.
You don't have the pace. Having overtaking areas is not going to change the fact that your car isn't as fast as it needs to be at the top of the leaderboard. And that's nothing against your driver or the FIA. It all has to do with your car.
And it comes back to that wonderful quote, change your fucking car.
I get it. Like, it's interesting. Toto's such an interesting character, but I do think he tends to project the things that are wrong rather than
definitely.
So instead of going, oh, we've had a bad run, I wonder why, he's like, we've had a bad run, it's your fault.
The race was boring. We couldn't do anything about it. You need to fix it.
You know what? I'd much prefer to have a boring race and be able to say at the end of the race that both George and Lewis, they finished healthy, strong, alive, they're well, and will do better.
Walk where they didn't have to have physio for weeks after to get rid of the effects of porpoising or anything like that.
Yep. I would much prefer that than for them to be, P2 with injuries or, crashed in the side of a wall because they were trying to make it more exciting. Like, that's not what I want for this race. It's not what I would enjoy. And I would actually I'd probably stop watching the race game like that.
And it's also like, who was an absolute trooper this weekend?
So many people, but tell me your opinion.
Oscar Piastri. The poor little dude had food poisoning all weekend, or at least some form of a tummy bug. And I feel like he did pretty well to finish where he did, qualify where he did, and perform in the sprint how he did in that condition.
Exactly. You look at Sergio in Melbourne when he had some sort of tummy bug / food poisoning,
which we haven't ruled out as being from Daniel, who offers to do the catering.
I get back in that car.
He's like, I'm at home. I want to race. One of you's taking the one for the team.
I definitely wouldn't put it past him. But I think like Sergio he was literally crashing the car when he was sick, where we didn't see that from Oscar. So he did it really well. I've got to say, on the topic of Oscar though, one thing that really hurt my heart was, when he was in Melbourne, and he's an Aussie, people weren't as enthusiastic to see him as they were Daniel Ricciardo. And I know Daniel Ricciardo's been our reigning champ, and he's beloved by everyone for years. But it kind of hurt my heart to see that people were like, oh yeah, Oscar. They weren't like, oh my God, it's Oscar. Where I'm hoping that in the next year or two, that, enthusiasm builds for him, because he is Australian. He is our own little boy. Like, he's doing so well. He's racing hard. He's done an amazing job this weekend, even though he was sick. So I'm really interested, and I'm excited for him moving forward to have the enthusiasm that he was lacking in Melbourne, and I hope he gains that throughout the season. And I hope next season he comes in and there's just like a choir of people just singing out his name.
Because I think he's also at the disadvantage of that not a lot of people would have seen what he's done in F3 and F2 coming through the ranks. So for Melbourne to be this third race on the calendar, for a lot of people, they wouldn't have seen what he's capable of and his potential and what he's like behind the wheel. They would just have the opinion from the first two races, which from McLaren were an absolute shit show.
I think more than that is that, the position he's in now used to belong to the beloved Danny Rick. And even though it is in absolutely no way, shape or form Oscar's fault, he had nothing to do with Daniel leaving, I still think that there's this underlining sort of, not hatred, but just this dislike, because it's like, that's where Daniel should be. That was supposed to be for Daniel, and now you're there. Where I think as the season goes on, he proves his mettle, and, we see that Daniel is so happy back with Red Bull. I think it's going to slowly get away from that and be like, no, that's where Oscar's meant to be. That's where Daniel's meant to be. Everything's dandy. This is perfect. And like, that happiness will build up again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two, Arthur's Leclerc's up in the F1. And you'll sit there and go, I've seen him race in the F2 and he was really, really good. This is exactly where he needs to be.
But also Arthur's got that, his name will be recognised because of Charles. It's going to be like drivers like Ollie Bierman and stuff like that who have come out of the gates and performed marvellously.
You know who I would like to see? I see Sophia. I can't say last name, so I'm not going to try.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about there. But I think she would do amazing.
It'd be really fun to see a woman in modern day F1.
I would even just like to see her, because I know she came out of F3 and she's now back. But I would like to see her at least be able to progress to F2, so that way she can be in consideration for an F1 seat.
I think I would definitely love in my lifetime, and I definitely think we'll achieve it. And, you and I are only so young, but I would love to see a woman in modern day F1. I would also love to watch Sophia progress in success, because not only is she a woman and you and I can, relate to her, but also the fact that she's such an amazing driver.
Oh my God, I know.
I could not take my eyes off her at the Melbourne GP. I was like, this is absolutely fantastic. Look at her. She really held her own. And even when we had a few cars that were having problems, just the usual, she really stuck through it. She was really quite remarkable. And yeah, I was really not taken back, but I was really, really happily surprised by just how efficient she was. And I was sitting there going, I can't wait, because I know that of anyone, this will probably be the woman I see in F1 one day.
Yeah, definitely. Opinions on the new sprint format. What were your thoughts? Did we like it? Did we not like it? Sprint Saturdays?
I'm very on the fence about the sprint. In one way, I'm completely on side with Max in that, if you damage a car and you can't race day, then it's a major problem. But at the same time, I'm also on the side of, it does give the midfield time to, get some points and come forward and, show their mettle, which is really good. So didn't help either. I didn't really get to sit down and really watch it and take it in to understand if I like it or not. But I'm very on the fence. I think if I sit down and I'm able to actually go through what happened, what it's like and how it runs, I'll have a bit more of a decision. I do think having quali on ride day is difficult because, like, as we had in the Melbourne, you have your P1, your P2, so you can find out anything wrong with the car. And then Saturday you have your P3 and then your quali, and you can kind of work, again, if there's any issues, you work them out. Like I said earlier, Alfa Romeo were putting the paraffin wax all over Bottas's car and making him drive to see the aerodynamics, where we kind of lose that bit of work. So if there's anything that needs to be, finalized, we don't really have that time to assess and then action on it. We've just kind of, at the moment, I'm just so indecisive.
I don't mind the sprint in its current format, well, the new format, really, but I think it's a bit harsh expecting teams to be able to do such a short turnaround. Because, I mean, once the sprint's done, they can't touch the car until the next day. So if you've got damage and things that need to be repaired, you've only got 4 hours the next day to be able to fix the car and repair anything before the main race, which is where you get your big points. And I don't know, maybe FIA and Formula One are trying to take down the top teams so that way the midfield have an opportunity. If Red Bulls crash out, Ferrari crash out, Mercedes and Aston crash out, then you've got midfield teams that are able to get up on the podium and get more points and make things more interesting. But I think there's a better way to do it. You could just flip the grid.
100%. I think the problem with me, and then seeing Max's car with a gaping hole in the side of it from the sprint race, I actually thought to myself, 2 cars is probably the only way we can do this effectively, or we need to have it so that they can actually work on the cars after damage, because either way, like you said, if something drastic happens to that car, 4 hours is not enough.
No.
We're putting a lot of pressure on the mechanics to fix a car that is about to carry someone, and if they can't fix it in time and something goes wrong with that driver, like it's not worth it.
And take Logan Sargent, for example. He totaled his car in sprint qualifying, which ruled him out of the rest of qualifying, and then he was unable to compete in the sprint anyway because the car was so damaged there was no way in hell they were going to have the time to fix it and repair it. So the team's main focus then was getting it prepared for the main race on Sunday. So they've gone out and they've now had to spend however much money. He's blown two sets of tires, and they're going to have to fund all of these new parts and things. The cost of it, I don't know if they've really weighed up, is the cost of it really akin to what value it gets?
Yeah.
For Williams, they've been struggling. They've been doing pretty good so far this season. They've just sort of, by having the sprint and such an intense qualifying session on a tricky track such as Baku, I don't know if that was the right track to start the new format on. Maybe somewhere a bit easier or a little bit like not a street circuit, for the love of God. Like get rid of Baku and put one on an actual circuit like Silverstone or something like that, where it's still going to be tricky, but you've got more runoff and you're less likely to clip a wall.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think there was a lot of strategy fuck-ups this weekend. Like I think a lot of teams just, as said in an interview, I think it was Charles before the race, he was just saying like, oh, we've got plan B, we've got plan A, we've got plan B, we've got plan C. And then they're like, what is it? And he was like telling you.
Well, Ferrari have, as we know, plan A through Z, and they fucking go from plan A to plan Q in a matter of minutes.
But I think quite a lot, I think it was Carlos who said, well, we'll move on to the next strategy. I think a lot of the strategies over this weekend just weren't working. And I think teams were coming at the race from the wrong angle, if that makes sense. Like perhaps they were looking at last year's race and thinking, well, we'll try and do something similar to that, where it's changed and, different conditions. You can't treat every race the same. There's always going to be factors and conditions that are different. And I just don't think that the teams really had their strategy finite this weekend. I think we saw a lot of strategy fuck-ups and a lot of uncertainty about a few things. And it was borderline painful to watch this weekend.
And I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that over the winter break, there was so many chops and changes with team principals. It's to the point where a lot of teams would have to have gone back to the drawing board. They have a different team principal to what they did last year. So they're having to relearn everything, not only about the team, but how this specific car this team is going to work at this track. And by trying to copy and paste what happened with the previous team principal got in this race and how it went for the team then isn't really working. It's a bit counterproductive.
I agree.
It's like...
I just feel like, I mean, the race was boring and I was prepared to have a boring race. I was happy with it. But I think the team's strategies were all a bit off. I think there was a few, I just don't think it was fully thought through. And I just think there was a lot of things that went wrong that could have been avoided but weren't. Like, I felt like a lot of things weren't fully thought through.
And I think the most surprising strategy fuck up of the weekend was Red Bull.
I know. I've been trying to avoid it because I'm so happy with how the race went. But I agree. It was a bit of a strategy fuck up.
Why on earth would you decide pit your championship leading driver when you've got a car stopped on track? Why would you not just wait one more lap, see if we get a safety car or a virtual safety car and pit him then?
I think even more than that, there's a car on track. It's inevitable that you're going to have a safety car.
And I mean, yes, there's the argument that, I mean, they don't know. He could have got the car going again, could have rolled back on track and kept going. But wait that extra lap and find out. Max's tyres were not in a appalling condition where he had to pit in that moment. And the safety car just happened to come out the next lap. He could have gone for another few laps. I mean, I think it was Bernie Collins who said on commentary that the baseline for the first pit stops in last season's race was lap 16.
Yeah.
And yeah, different conditions, different tyres and all of that. But we were only on lap 13. That is very early into a 51 lap race to pit.
Yeah, and like you said, his tyres were fine.
There was no need for that call. I mean, it worked out great for Checo, and Max took it like a champ in comparison to his sprint debacle.
Yeah, and I think it was probably, like we said, I think it was good for that strategy fuck up too, because Max will now realise, like, his team are good, but they make mistakes too.
Yeah.
He's allowed to make mistakes. I think with Max, he also thinks he's not allowed to, or he's, he can't, where it's like, it kind of reminds him he can make mistakes. His team are going to make mistakes. And sometimes he's not going to be on the top of the board. But if it's Checo, that's really good for Red Bull.
And I think, after the sprint, I think he would have had to have gone back and had a refresher on his media training and what is acceptable behaviour in Parc Fermé and what can be said in interviews.
And also just even his interaction with George Russell, also just a reminder that people can hear you.
Like, don't assault the guy that's a foot taller than you in the middle of the pit. He's wearing a helmet. He can just headbutt you. You
don't have to have a mic on or have a mic in your face for people to hear you. Like, what you say, it affects your image. And thankfully, I think people are so used to him being dubbed the angry Dutchman that his image isn't marred by this. People are just like, oh, it's just classic Verstappen.
Max.
But I still do think that it needs to, he does need to take in consideration that he does have all eyes on him. He is the world champion. Everyone expects big things from him, which I know is a lot of pressure, but he needs to be really mindful.
Yeah, I think he will learn a lot from this weekend. He will have a refresher training on his media and his PR and what, it'll just be next time. Doesn't matter how mad you are or where you finish, just go up, shake the guy's hand, pat him on the back, and keep walking. You don't have to say anything. Just look at the interaction between Checo and Charles. They don't usually get along. They're not usually friends.
I know. It was really sweet to see.
It honestly melted my heart a little bit. But that because I also saw it after I saw a meme of like Charles and Max being like all really like happy and looking at a meme together or something on someone's phone, and then like Charles like, cowering away from Checo.
It was really sweet. And even when Charles was in the wrong chair, he's like, do you want me to get up? And Checo was like, no, it's fine. Like,
he was like, at least let me have this.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
But he literally was just like, he just sat down, like, he was no problem. Like, it's good sportsmanship. And That's what people want to see at the end of everything.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening, and a big thank you and a shout out to Allison for joining me on this week's episode. It's been a pleasure having you. Follow me on the socials and let me know if you guys want me to do more collabs.